This is Chris Collinsworth. Be sure to check out the PFF College podcast as our experts provide insight on all the league's top stories. Every game, every player, every play. Download and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite provider.
Hello and welcome to the Pro Football Focus Preview Podcast, the second round of the playoffs. And after 4 amazing games last week, I can't imagine this week being any worse. David Tuckman alongside Sam Monson and Mike Renner. Mike, how are you, buddy? You got your computer up and working now?
Yes, I do. I'm doing fantastic here. Having a good morning so far. How about you?
All's well. Hey, we are drowning in California. I know it's. I usually say that in a joke, but our drought is over. It's quite exciting.
That's good news. That was beginning to be a problem, wasn't it? The whole drought situation. It's good to hear it solved itself in the course of a week.
I will just say, in all seriousness, we had like a 6-year drought going on, and apparently our reserves were down to, just drips and drops, and apparently millions and millions and billions of gallons of water have filled up our lakes. It's good news. And even better news, since the San Diego Chargers are moving up north to the Los Angeles Chargers, we now have 2 football teams in my backyard.
Well,
sort of. You can pick a new one now besides the Jets talk.
Yeah. You know what? Enough of that, okay, Renner? Did you guys see the logo for the new LA Chargers?
Does that even qualify as a logo? I mean, if you just write LA and make one of the little lines into a lightning bolt.
Yeah, they went way out on a limb with that. A lightning bolt, LA. Ooh.
Yeah, Spanos is notoriously cheap. My guess is that his grandson made that logo last night.
Or they just fired it up on 99 Designs instead of, going to a legit professional. Just like here's a $50 award for the best design. Some guy came up with that in the 5 minutes it took.
Yeah, it looks like it. Anyway, you figure LA, you'd come up with a better logo. We have 4 great games this weekend. Actually, I should say we have 3 great games, and then Houston still in there against New England. We will talk about that game. And then, of course, Mike's crappy bets of the week. Mike, you're going to be covering all 4 games?
Yep, all 4 games again. I went 3 out of 4 last week, so I think we can erase the crappy. I think that's I think they're just my bets now. They might not be great, but they've been far from crappy since early in the season, I'll say.
Fair enough. You know what? I can do some alliteration here. How about Mike's mediocre bets?
That's better. That's perfect, actually. Don't expect too much, but you'll still be pleasantly surprised if it does well. So yeah, that's where I live, in the mediocre range.
Did all the favorites cover last week?
Yes.
That's not something you normally see. Let's get right into it. So Saturday's games, we have Seattle traveling to Atlanta. Sam, I saw you talking about how underrated Seattle's cornerbacks were when playing against the run. Is that something that's really going to help the Seattle Seahawks?
I think it'll certainly help. It's something that Richard Sherman himself has actually complained to me about before, that he just doesn't get any credit for playing the run, which actually is true. It's not something that cornerbacks typically complain about. But
hold on a second, Sam.
Hold
on a second. Sick brag. What do you mean Richard Sherman complained to you personally? What does he call you up or text you?
No, he's a Twitter DM man. He's a Twitter DM man. He doesn't need to pick up the phone. Just fires over the Twitter messages.
Oh, you weren't just hanging out with him on last Friday night?
No. Me and Richard haven't quite taken our relationship to that level yet, but maybe sometime in the future. It's not something you usually hear from corners, that they want to be seen, they want to have their play against the run recognized, but it's definitely a factor in these for the Seahawks team. And I think the whole secondary really a little bit less now that Earl Thomas has been replaced by Stephen Terrell. But when you think Cam Chancellor is basically a linebacker at times down there at the line of scrimmage, the Seahawks corners own the top 2 marks in run stop percentage and 3 of the top 4. So all 3 of their corners have played meaningful snaps. are in the top 4 of the run stop percentage league wide. So those guys, there's nobody there that's basically just a passenger in the run game. Those guys all come up and they'll all lay a hit against the running backs, and they all play a meaningful part of maintaining gap discipline and bottling up the potential running lanes. And it had a major effect on the Atlanta running game. The first time the two teams met, they barely got anything going on the ground, and all of the joy they did have was through the air. So that's I think the first interesting part of this. The more I looked at this matchup, I started off thinking when the pick request for the PFF picks thing came out, I thought it was basically a pick 'em, slight edge to Atlanta because they're at home. But the more I look at it, the more I don't like the matchup for Seattle. I just don't. It just seems too hard a task to shut that offense down.
I
sorry, Mike,
will
go
say
ahead.
though that I think the run defense, them stopping the Falcons' run game in the first time around wasn't really a fluke. I think the way they're built, like you said, with their corners being able to tackle, the Falcons do a lot of things with pin and pull pitch plays to the wides, out wide, those man runs with the wide receivers tight to the formation that put their cornerbacks in a position to make tackles. They force cornerbacks to tackle, and the Seahawks corners being able to tackle is not a small impact on this game. Last time they played, the Falcons running backs broke only 1 tackle on 17 carries, only had something like 27 yards after contact. So they really shut them down. And the Seahawks didn't even have Cam Chancellor in that game. So now they have Cam Chancellor. I think that running game still will struggle to move the ball consistently against the Seahawks defense.
So let's talk about the passing game then. How can the Seattle Seahawks slow that passing game down? Matt Ryan, as I've always pointed out, he's 1-4 in the playoffs in his career. Not obviously a huge sample size, but at the same time, this is so far what his career has been made of. And at this point, he is going to be judged by what he can do in the playoffs. Obviously they've got Julio Jones. They have some other weapons there. Can Seattle secondary slow that passing game down, Sam?
Am I right in saying the one came against Seattle back in whenever it was?
Yeah, it was the home game when Seattle was just emerging. And Seattle played them really tough.
The first thing I think, yeah, exactly, 2012. There you go. The first thing they're going to do again, I suspect, is put Richard Sherman tracking Julio Jones, which they did in the first game, and they've done a lot more this season. But Sherman only tracks side to side. He doesn't go to the slot the way Revis used to, the way Patrick Peterson does. And there's a lot of guys actually in the league at the moment that have started tracking receivers, but don't follow them inside, which doesn't make any sense in a league where pretty much every receiver can play inside. All these number one receivers, they're not exclusive perimeter guys. So if you really want to get them away from that top corner, just put them in the slot. The Packers have done it with Jordy Nelson. The Bengals have done it with AJ Green. The Steelers have done it with Antonio Brown. And the Falcons have done it with Julio Jones. And they did it in the last game. Sherman against Jones in that game, I think Jones caught 3 passes for 40 yards, something like that. But he caught 139, so 140 in the game because he picked up like 100 yards against everybody else when they moved him to the slot. So, I mean, the Falcons opened that game with Julio in the slot on the first drive, I think basically just to see if Sherman would follow him in there, and he didn't. So from that moment on, they knew that they could get him away from Richard Sherman when they wanted to. And either the Seahawks need to figure a better way of defending Julio Jones when he does move inside of the slot, or they need to start letting Sherman follow him in there, because that's a big problem if you don't have a solution to that.
Something you pointed out, of course, Richard Sherman. I think I remember when they played against the New York Jets and he followed Brandon Marshall across the field. He has not been nearly as effective away from his familiar side of the field.
Yeah, I mean he got beaten a couple of times in that game, and at the time, certainly when he got beaten badly for 1 touchdown, and at that point I speculated whether it was being uncomfortable on that side of the field. I don't know that it is. I think statistically his numbers are actually pretty good on the other side, and I don't know that's a big issue. It's probably something that if you're not doing it a lot, is a problem, but if you start being the guy that tracks people side to side, it's probably not a big thing. But it's more, they need to figure out some solution to Julio Jones just lining up in the slot and gashing them for 100 yards the way they did last time.
And him lining up in the slot, I think, is even a bigger deal with Earl Thomas out this season. Julio Jones, He took about 25% of his snaps from the slot. So it's not just that he does it when a team like won't follow him to the slot. He does it regularly, game after game, he's doing it. So it's a weapon that they have, and testing the seams of that defense without Earl Thomas is a huge weapon that they're going to have, because, Earl Thomas can cover those seams from the middle of the field, whereas Steven Terrell probably not going to be able to have near as much range, not going to be able to cover both seams when they run that, cover 3 defense. So I think that we'll see a healthy dose of that. And if they have effectiveness with it, that I do think that Falcons offense will still be able to move the ball fairly well.
Taking a look at the first matchup, by the way, it was, from a stats point of view, eerily even. Both teams had 22 first downs. The difference in time of possession was 18 seconds. Neither team really could run the ball effectively. You're talking about really the only difference between this game were the 2 turnovers that Atlanta had and no turnovers for Seattle. And then keep in mind, if you remember that game, obviously, there was that infamous play at the end where Julio Jones, there should have been a penalty flag thrown. It was clearly pass interference. They did not throw the flag, and the game was over. Atlanta Falcons very easily could have won that game 27-26. Let's go to the other side of the ball, Mike. Seattle's running game. To me, if Seattle is going to win this game, if Seattle is going to have some more success in the playoffs, they have to replicate what they did last week with Thomas Rawls. What did you see out of the Seattle offensive line that changed? Because for the first time all season, they actually looked pretty good. Thomas Rawls looked great. And is that something they can do again this weekend?
I think they definitely can have some success running the ball against this Falcons team. Now, the Falcons are going to keep a safety in the box to try to prevent that, most likely, just because that's what they do as much as any other team in the NFL. But I still think they'll have some success because those defensive tackles for Atlanta are somewhat comparable to those of the Lions, where they're not guys who are hold the line of scrimmage guys who are going to keep their linebackers clean. They can be moved off the ball. Grady Jarrett's probably their best run defender, and even him has struggled sometimes in terms of getting moved off the ball. So that's what they did last week. They ran a ton of zone read. They're going to run a ton of zone read again this week because, it's the playoffs. You don't care about Russell Wilson's, long-term or health for the rest of the season. You got to put it all on the line. You got to run your best running plays. And so they're going to have those looks again and again. So I think they'll have some success. I don't think it's going to be, 160 or whatever Rawls went for last week, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go over 100 between Wilson and Rawls.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this actually, it's a fascinating matchup because I don't think that Seattle are going to be able to shut down that Atlanta offense. I think it's going to have success. It's going to move the ball. It's going to put up points. So the other side of the ball, Seattle's offense has to actually match them in a shootout. And I think they will be able to run the ball. They'll probably be able to do some things in the passing game as well. I think we'll see one of the better Seattle offensive performances because that Falcons defense just isn't that strong. But it's becoming a game where it's out of their comfort zone. They need to stay in a foot race with the best offense in the NFL this season, and I don't know that they're equipped to do that.
At the end of the day, it sounds like, Sam, it sounds like you are going Atlanta. Mike?
Yep. I'm going to lean Atlanta as well. I will say this. There's one matchup that I think ends up I don't want to say deciding it, but one matchup that has to go Atlanta's way, and I think it's Vic Beasley. He just has to play better than he did last time. He basically disappeared last time they played, didn't have any sacks, any hits, and that's going up against Gary Gilliam there, one of the, not a very good right tackle. So I think he has to have a better game. He has to, get some pressure on Wilson, chase him down for a sack, get a forced fumble, something like that for their defense to, win that kind of, if it's going to be a shootout, win that, turnover battle.
I like Seattle this week. I think it's going to be an upset. We didn't see any upsets last week, and I think this will be an upset, although Seattle's a 5-point dog. I like the matchup. I like what I saw out of Seattle's offensive line last week. I think they're going to be able to run the ball this week. And, until Matty Ice performs in the playoffs, I'm not a believer. Now, for you Atlanta fans out there that are sending me hate tweets already, keep in mind, I was not a believer in Carolina last year either, and they made all the way to the Super Bowl. So that could keep you happy. Let's travel to New England. The most lopsided game of the week for sure. Houston, a 16-point dog at New England, Mike.
Is that the biggest line ever in the divisional round? That has to be one of the biggest. I can't remember.
I can't remember a bigger one. I mean, I've seen bigger lines in the playoffs, most notably back in, I want to say 1994, when the 49ers were bigger favorites over the San Diego Chargers in the Super Bowl. But for the divisional round, this is about as big as it gets. Keep in mind, though, New England beat Houston 27-0 with their third-string quarterback 3.5 months ago. Yeah,
I will say rarely in the playoffs give a team zero chance of winning, but I give the Texans zero chance of winning this game. I don't see any possible way they could win because, I mean, to kind of flip the tide in this one, they'd have to have some big plays down the field, and they were the least explosive offense in the end. Like, they were the least capable team of creating big plays down the field of anyone. Osweiler was dead last of any all-starting quarterbacks with 379 deep passing yards this year. They're just not built to, kind of have that explosive offensive performance, and they're going to have to score, 24 points or something to get it done, and they're not going to be able to consistently move the ball against the Patriots. They just won't. There's just no chance that with what they have offensively at the moment. They need big plays, and I don't see them getting them.
Okay, well, I mean, if it's a foregone conclusion that New England's going to win this game, give us some matchups that we should be watching, Sam.
I think it is probably a foregone conclusion. I think their only hope is one of those games that has just a freak level of turnovers, like a couple of special teams turnovers can really swing games massively in terms of, not only field position, but you turn the ball over and you get the extra possession as well on a short field. So if they get a couple of fumbles on returns or that kind of thing, maybe. Otherwise, they're in real trouble. I'm kind of intrigued to see how AJ Bouye does at corner for the Texans. He's had such a fantastic season, upcoming free agent, and aided by the Oakland Raiders quarterback situation last week. I don't think he allowed a single catch on 7 targets. The Patriots, obviously, totally different kind of offense, totally different types of receivers as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he does get exposed with a more of a short passing game and that kind of quicker and nimbler receivers, or if he still has another fine game, because the guy has really been excellent all season long.
Yeah, I will say this. The best chance that the Texans have is if one of the Pats cornerbacks goes down, because the Patriots are going to play matchups with their corners. Last time, Logan Ryan followed DeAndre Hopkins and Malcolm Butler followed Will Fuller. If one of those guys, does go down and Malcolm Butler isn't able to guard Will Fuller, you have someone else on him, then possibly you could see some big plays on the field. But with those matchups, how those stylistically match up so well, those cornerbacks with the wide receivers, I just don't see it happening at this point.
Not only do I think the New England Patriots are going to win this game, I think 16 points, as shockingly as that might be, because it's so big, I think it's a gift. I mean, I think this is a 38-7 game. This is just.
I'm betting that.
Short of Brady getting hurt and Garoppolo getting hurt, and
that's the thing.
I mean, short of something like that happening in the first quarter, it's just not going to happen. Let's move on to the Sunday games, which might be a little bit more interesting, and certainly are. Pittsburgh Steelers, Kansas City Chiefs. Basically, it's a pick'em. I don't know why. It just might be a gut instinct thing. I really like KC. I feel like if there's a team, if there's kind of a long shot in the AFC to win the Super Bowl, I think KC is one of those teams that could. I think they're going to win this week, and I think they could surprise New England next week. I'm not necessarily predicting that, but just something tells me I like this KC team. I like how they're built. I like how they're coached. Mike, tell me I'm crazy.
You're not crazy. I like this KC team too, because they're kind of, if that defensive line is healthy, if Justin Houston is fully healthy, if Tamba Hali and D Ford are fully healthy, this is a dangerous defensive line that could put together some sort of New York Giants type of run through the postseason, where they're just getting after opposing quarterbacks at, a high rate, and teams just, can't deal with it because a four-man line of D Ford, Chris Jones, Tom Bahali, and Justin Houston is a deadly four-man pass rush on third down situations. That's going to, affect quarterbacks routinely. If those four guys, they're just going to beat their blocks most of the time because they're over the second half of the season. Chris Jones was the fourth highest, pass rushing productivity of any interior player. We all know what those other guys can do. Tom Bahali was, basically rested this entire season, only played, I think, 592 snaps this year. He had averaged well over 900 each of the past 8 seasons. He was, a guy that rarely came out before this year. They finally started giving him a rest, but it's the playoffs now. I don't think he's coming off the field anymore. And when you have a full-strength defensive line like that, it can impact the quarterback's play, especially if Roethlisberger's, ankle injury is, the real deal or something that's going to affect him at all.
Yeah, it's, me and Mike have been on opposite sides of the Chiefs debate this year, and most of it surrounding Alex Smith and whether you can actually win a Super Bowl with Alex Smith. And the thing that I said that kind of started the whole thing is that if they're going to win, Alex Smith needs to play better than he had at that point in the season. And certainly in week 17, he did. That was the Alex Smith that they need to win a Super Bowl. It was a guy that was playing far better, and a guy who also broke out his threat as his rushing threat, a guy that can actually take off from the pocket or even be part of that running game with read option looks and make plays on the ground with his legs. He carried the ball 6 times in that game, and he averaged 2.8 carries in the other games of the season. So more than doubled his output in terms of rushing on the ground, which is something that was a big part of their run a year ago. Down the stretch and into the playoffs, you suddenly got this guy who was a danger to teams. And I kind of wonder if that was a deliberate thing this year, that they were almost keeping their powder dry and not unleashing Alex Smith as a rushing weapon until they got to when they really needed to make it happen. So week 17 and into the playoffs, when teams haven't really prepared for it as much as they would have had they been doing it all season long. But yeah, this Chiefs, I mean, they were really close a year ago. They ran the Patriots extremely close and could easily have won that game. And they're better this year. They've got Tyreek Hill, who's a complete game changer for them in multiple phases. And they've got that defense, that Mike said. So this is a team that can definitely put a run together. They're a team that even if, they don't need to catch fire to do it either. This is a good team and capable of winning games just at their baseline this season.
Talk about Pittsburgh's defense for a little while. This is a defense that wasn't expected, at least from Pro Football Focus, wasn't expected to be great this year, but they've outperformed. Talk about the matchup. I mean, you touched on Alex Smith and Tyreek Hill and the Kansas City offense. Talk about Pittsburgh's defense and how they match up against that offense, Mike.
This is why I'm not 100% confident in picking the Chiefs, because of just basically the Steelers' defensive structure and how they play their defense. They basically bait opposing quarterbacks into checking the ball down. We saw that game early in the season against Kirk Cousins where everyone was just like, why won't he throw downfield? It's because that's what the Steelers do. They drop real soft in coverage and trust that they have these super athletic linebackers who will come up and make the stop for a short gain. When they play split safety coverages this year, they're allowing only 6.3 yards per attempt to opposing quarterbacks. That's one of the top 5 in the NFL. And the fact is, at 6.3 yards per attempt, but on a 67.2 completion percentage. So it's basically they allow the short pass, but then they come up and stop it and make you do that all the way down the field. And the thing is, Alex Smith's MO throughout his career is he's going to play right into the hands of a defense when it does that. He's going to check down immediately, allow the defense to make that stop. And so Alex Smith, if he is doing that, he's going to have to play lights out and not miss a single third down, because they're going to get into 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 5s with that type of offense. And he's just going to have to play lights out from there. So that to me is why I'm a little concerned going Chiefs here, but I think they'll have at least some success.
From public perception, people seem to love Pittsburgh because, whether it's, Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown are fantasy football studs, which obviously they are, and people are so aware of this team and they think they can make a run. I'm a little bit concerned about Pittsburgh simply because of what you just said, because they do bait teams into checkdowns, and they're basically playing, if they are going to get to the Super Bowl, they have to beat 2 teams that are really comfortable playing small ball, check down offense. And with, players as electrifying as Tyreek Hill, who, if Alex Smith keeps completing those 4-yard, 3-yard passes to Spencer Ware and Tyreek Hill, those guys are going to break one of them. And then obviously, even if Pittsburgh does get past this team, they're going to have to face, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, who they're happy to take the 4 or 5-yard pass all day. And they've obviously shown through the years that they can do that over 14 plays and over down the field.
Yeah, Alex Smith's thing is he very rarely makes a mistake when he's doing that. It's one thing. The same with Tom Brady, although obviously Brady's got far more to his game than Alex Smith has. They're both comfortable playing that kind of offense where you take the small gain and you take it every single time, even if the big shot never comes up. And you can do that as long as you don't screw up. If you screw up once and you throw an interception, you've got problems. And Smith did that the last time against Pittsburgh earlier in the season. He threw a pick. He also had a ridiculous amount of passes dropped, unusually. They had 6 drops in that game. But I kind of like their ability to play that offense. Like you said, they've got guys that can make plays after the catch. Tyreek Hill obviously is a threat to score pretty much any time he touches the ball. He had a touchdown in that game. Travis Kelce is the league's best run after the catch tight end. Also had a touchdown in that game, I think. Neither of them had a huge amount of yardage, but I think both are capable of taking those passes and actually making something happen with them, which is what they're going to need to happen. The other thing is their offensive line in that game got absolutely abused the first time out against the Steelers. Pretty much everybody except Mitchell Schwartz had a terrible game, one of their worst games of the season. And I don't think there's a really good reason that happened. I don't think that they're dramatically overmatched going against the Steelers D-line or even defensive front. So I can't see a reason they would play that badly collectively a second time around. They might have a couple of guys have bad games. The way James Harrison is playing at the moment, certainly it's going to give Eric Fisher some real problems. But I think the line will play better overall, which has to help.
Yeah, I think the offensive line has, as the season's gone on with some of those young guys at guards, has improved a lot over the past 4 games. I want to say the Chargers, the Broncos, the Titans, and the Raiders. They haven't given up. Smith hasn't been pressured in any single one of those games, 30% of his snap dropbacks, which 30% of the dropbacks is just NFL average. So he hasn't even been pressured at the league average rate against 4 pass rushing teams that are among, the highest pressure rates in the NFL. So the offensive line's come a long way since then, I believe. Yeah,
Duvernay Tardif on his own conceded 7 hurries in that first game, and that is more than a third of his total hurries or total pressure over the entire season. The past 3 games, he hasn't allowed any pressure whatsoever. So that's one guy that's played dramatically better. I think it's all, like you say, it's almost across the board that offensive line is way better than it was the first time they played.
Talk about Pittsburgh's offense. Obviously, we can't overlook Le'Veon Bell has been on an absolute tear. He had a very good game the first time these two teams played. I think he had 18 carries for about $150 or something along those lines. How does Kansas City slow him down? And obviously the other threats that the Pittsburgh Steelers have.
With difficulty. Le'Veon Bell he's like the running back version of Aaron Rodgers in that it's
that was my take earlier this week, Sam.
Hot take, stolen hot take. I like it.
You stole my take.
It's impossible to play the guy. That's what I do. I listen to the one useful thing Renner says in a season, thieve it.
You've plagiarized him. This is terrible. In this day and age, who plagiarizes?
Exactly, especially when it's on audio and people just listen to the last one.
Yes.
But yeah, he's basically impossible to defend at the moment. You can't. The way that you would schematically take away a guy like Le'Veon Bell actually plays into his hand, which is the same problem you have with Aaron Rodgers. The thing you want to do to stop what he's most dangerous at is just facilitating everything else that he does. So you want to try and stop the big play with Le'Veon Bell, so you're constantly, taking peeks and trying to kind of bottle him up before he gets through the line, and he just waits for you to make a mistake and then bursts through a gap that you opened up and turns into a big gain. And that's not even factoring in the threat that he is as a receiver out of the backfield or even split wider into the slot. So he is a complete back. He is one of the most dangerous weapons in the entire NFL. And yeah, that's just one guy you have to worry about, because then you've got Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I think if you're the Chiefs here, if you're trying to scheme against the Steelers, you almost just cede that, hey, we're going to give Le'Veon Bell 120 yards on the ground. You can't add extra resources there, and then all of a sudden, oops, I got beat over the top by Antonio Brown because we're too focused on the run. I think you have to just say, hey, we'll play our sound run defense, but we're not going to do anything else to try to stop him, because 150 yards on the ground, that's not going to beat you. 350 yards through the air, that's what's going to beat you if you're the Chiefs. So you can't be too worried about it. He's going to get his yards. He's going to, be difficult to stop, but you just have to trust that, hey, our defensive line, our linebackers are good enough to not absolutely get, 250 yards against us on the ground. They're good enough to just limit him enough to where we'll play the coverage on the back end that we want to, and we'll win that way.
Mike, you touched on Kansas City's defensive line and how good they are rushing the passer. And, this is a team that theoretically could go on like a 2011 New York Giants type run. But if Le'Veon Bell is having that kind of success running the ball, won't that slow the pass rushers down?
I mean, it's kind of you get into third down situations still. You still fire off the ball. I think it's kind of a false dichotomy that you're all automatically slowing down as a pass rusher just to, obviously play action, that sort of stuff does affect it, but I don't think it's that much of I think it's a little overblown saying, a strong running game is going to slow down D-line. It's more what you do in terms of play action and working off the run that slows down D-line.
So who do we like, Mike?
This one's very close to me. I will go with the Chiefs just because of what I think that defense can do fully healthy. Obviously no Derek Johnson, but D-line fully healthy. I think it's just going to be different in that regard in terms of their first matchup. So I'll go with the Chiefs being at home.
Sam?
I think both of these Sunday games are basically a pick 'em. And I'm going to lean with the Chiefs as well. Though interestingly, me and Mike are the only PFF analysts that are going Kansas City this week. All the rest are going with the Steelers.
Well, I'm not feeling good about my pick either. It's a sweep. I like the Chiefs as well. As I already talked about why I like them. The more you talk about Le'Veon Bell, the more I question my pick. But I like the Chiefs this week. Let's travel to Dallas. The Green Bay Packers going to Dallas. If you read through the tea leaves, it certainly looks like Jordy Nelson is not going to play. They have not come out and said that yet. Apparently, he's going to try to practice, but if you listen to what Aaron Rodgers is saying, it looks like they have to win one game to get Jordy Nelson back. And Sam, just talk about for a moment what kind of loss that is for the Packers and how they replace him.
Yeah, I wrote a big piece going into that game about how you schematically take Jordy Nelson out of the game. It hadn't even occurred to me that the best way of doing it is to just smash him in the ribs with your helmet. That would have saved me an awful lot of writing. Yeah, obviously, he's their number one receiver. He's the one guy that you can trust to go on the outside, win consistently, and catch the ball, because that's the big part. Devontae Adams can go outside, can get open sometimes, but you can't trust him to actually catch the thing. So yeah, I think that's a huge loss. The other thing that Nelson does that I've said for a while is I think he's the best receiver in the NFL at the scramble drill. As soon as things break down and the initial route as it's drawn up on the chalkboard is gone, he adjusts quicker and better than I think any other receiver in the NFL. I was saying that even when he gets to the point where he can't get open anymore and he's kind of done as a conventional receiver, he will hang around for a few years the way Deion Branch did, just because he can get open on those scramble drill plays. And just, it's so valuable. It gives them, that's why he always scores so many touchdowns, because Rodgers will just buy those 7-second plays in the red zone and wait for him to get open in the end zone. And that's where he's looking almost the entire time, because he's the guy that's going to do it. So the Packers don't really have anyone that can do all those kind of things. So it's a big loss. It's a huge issue. That being said, Rodgers is just playing ridiculous stuff at the moment. So it's a big loss, but I don't actually know that it matters, because he is the issue. It's the fact that you said with Le'Veon Bell, how do you defend Aaron Rodgers at the moment?
Mike?
There are two. I want to say schematic options or schematic decisions that I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Dallas does in this one. The first one is basically how they attack Aaron Rodgers from a pass rushing standpoint, because they had in that first matchup, they only pressured Rodgers 5 times on 45 dropbacks. He was basically the Packers offensive line, best pass protecting offensive line in the NFL. And Dallas has had one of the lowest, pressure rates of any team in the NFL this year. Their D-line just hasn't been great. I know David Irving has emerged since then, been much better down the stretch, but I still don't trust them to get somewhat consistent pressure on Green Bay's offensive line, even with 4. So do they attack him by bringing that to 5-man rush, bringing that to a 6-man rush, making him get the ball out quickly? Or do they say, hey, we know we're not going to get pressure with 4, so we're not even going to bother. We're going to we're just going to rush 3. We're going to make you find that hole in our zone. We're going to make you, hold the ball for longer and trust that our guys can hold up in coverage, because I think that the Dallas secondary, we just ranked them our number 1 secondary in the NFL. They have enough guys to hold up in coverage against the Packers. So that to me is the one interesting matchup. And the other interesting matchup is the Cowboys offensively. They ran a handful of option looks early in the season, throughout the regular season, but it was not like what the San Francisco 49ers are doing with Kaepernick, or even how much the Seahawks run with Russell Wilson this year. So it was not an option heavy offense, but they have all the pieces to make it such they can. And that just adds another dimension that really you wouldn't have seen during the regular season, but is deadly and can, net them a lot more yards on the ground. So it'll be interesting to see if they go to a lot more option looks than they have in the past.
What is, pardon me, what is Green Bay's defense? I mean, obviously much maligned over the past few weeks. What do they do to stop the Dallas running game? And according to PFF, the second best offensive line in the league after Tennessee and Zeke. And obviously you just went over, Dak and his ability to run as well. How does Green Bay stop Dallas from running the ball just at will? And at the same time, I mean, if you're Dallas and you can run the ball well, you keep Aaron Rodgers on the sideline.
Yeah, I don't think they can.
I think Green Bay's defensive line is good enough that they won't be absolutely overpowered. I don't think that it'll be 5 yards per, but I think it'll be something like 2-2, 15-20, because their linebackers just aren't good enough to consistently fill, and not consistently win their blocks at the second level enough to, limit yards. So I think they're going to give up a handful of big plays on the ground, but I don't think it'll just be, methodically walking down the field. I just think the Green Bay defensive line is better than that.
Sam, what do you think about it? I mean, from Dallas's offense versus Green Bay's defense, what can Green Bay do to slow down this offense? And how do you think Dallas attacks them?
I think Dallas probably just does what they've done all the way through the season. This is, it's an offense that's worked. It's an offense that's been able to do what it wants to do all the way through the season, with the exception of a couple of ropey games where they've had real issues on the offensive line. So the Eagles gave them trouble because Brandon Graham was able to absolutely destroy Doug Free on the right side of that line. The Giants have given them trouble a couple of times because they're one of the few teams that are actually able to man up against that offensive line and limit or shut down the run game. I don't think Green Bay can do either of those things, really. So what they have to do is to hope that they get enough done. Like Mike says, you're going to give up some plays, but can you make a few in a sequence and get them off the field? You only need to shut them down twice in a drive and force them into 3rd and long. And then, you get one play that doesn't go or it isn't complete, and that's a drive done. So you only, it's the right sequence of plays rather than the total that they need to worry about. The other thing I think that's huge for them is whether Demarius Randall shows up and has the play at his best, because he's the kind of guy that has shown in the past when he's on, he can go head to head with a guy like Dez Bryant and at least be able to cover him and hold up and not get destroyed. But he's also had games this season where he's been eviscerated along with the rest of that Green Bay secondary. So you would assume that they're going to use him to try and cover Dez Bryant because he's the only guy that has a hope of doing that, I think. And how successful he is in that endeavor, I think, is a big part of how they're going to do in this game.
The problem with that, Sam, and I want your input on this, in my opinion, is that we've seen Dez essentially be invisible in some games, but it not affect Dallas at all. And in fact, you could make the argument that sometimes they almost force the ball to Dez to keep him happy. And with the other weapons that have emerged, and obviously Zeke and all those things, it almost feels like this is one of those teams where, okay, great, you took away Dez. I don't think that really affects Dallas's offense all that much.
Well, I think it's certainly it's one of the things you need to take away. I mean, like I said, I don't see this as a game where Green Bay's defense can actually stop Dallas. This offense is just too good. It's too varied. It's too complete. It's too balanced. And the Packers don't have enough on that defense to take away all those pieces. So you got to try and take away what you can and then hope that your offense is able to score more points than their offense. And I think that's the way this team is going to win, because the offense is what's driving them at the moment. It's Aaron Rodgers. So all they need to do is to stop Dallas from running wild and putting up like 35 points and making it a near impossible task for Aaron Rodgers. They don't need to win the game all by themselves.
Mike, let's say it's 21-3 at halftime, and Dak has just been horrendous. Does Romo come in the second half to save the day?
No, I think that after what we saw in Week 17, him barely getting a series, I think that ship has sailed. I think they pretty much wanted to shut down any sort of talk of him being the guy at any point in the playoffs. So I think 21-3, even if it gets out to 35-3, they're not going to put in Romo.
Fair enough. Hey, one thing that we are pretty bad about covering, but I wanted to throw this at you because there are a couple of really close games this weekend, at least on paper. Do you see special teams in any of these games making a significant difference? Because it's something we often overlook, we don't really talk about, but a lot of times that can be the difference in a close game. Sam?
The Pittsburgh Kansas City game, I think it has the most likelihood too. One, because Pittsburgh still put Antonio Brown back returning punts, which is something I am hugely in favor of. I think the teams that take their best players off their return team are just exercising a false economy. These guys can break open a game in one play, and there's no one play that they're more likely to do it in than returns, where guys are, lane discipline is all over the place. You can break a return at any time, and you have to see how successful some of these great players are at returns before they get dragged to the safety of offense or defense and never get let out there again. And it's because they get hurt on any one of these plays. They could get hurt catching a slant. They could get hurt run blocking. It can happen anytime. This is football. This is the playoffs, and man up and put your best players back there. And the Steelers do that with Antonio Brown. But also, Kansas City has some of the best special teams players in the entire league. Their special teams unit is really good. Eric Murray, a rookie out of Minnesota this year, was, I think, our all-pro special teams player. And obviously, Tyreek Hill has been a monster for them, returning the ball both as punts and kicks. So that, I think, has the real potential for there to be a big return somewhere in that game.
I refuse to talk special teams. So
you refuse to. You're boycotting special teams, Mike Renner. I don't do special teams. Mike, give us a pick though. Green Bay at Dallas. Who wins it?
In the end, I think Dallas still, just because I have fairly confident that their offense is not, all of a sudden going to get shut down. Whereas we saw last time Green Bay's offense just, got shut down by Dallas, is because Dallas can play man coverage. They have enough guys to go 5 deep to guard every one of Green Bay's wide receivers. Now, last matchup, they didn't have Jared Cook or Ty Montgomery at running back. So that's a difference. But they also probably are not going to have Jordy Nelson this week, which is a huge difference. Dallas in man coverage this year, only allowing 5.3 yards per attempt against. That's the third best in the NFL. I don't see Rodgers having that much success that he's had, against Minnesota, against the good defenses he's faced of late.
Sam?
This is the pick that I feel least comfortable with, but I'm going to lean Dallas as well. They did the best job on Aaron Rodgers that anybody has done on him for a long time, since, in fact, the Denver Broncos did a very similar thing. in terms of, and it's the way that teams have shut down Aaron Rodgers and the Packers before has all been the same. It's playing man coverage across the board and then figuring out a way to keep him in the pocket and limit where he wants to go with the ball early. And the Broncos did it, but just by manning up across the board and just being better than the receivers. The Cowboys threw some wrinkles at it in that they went man coverage, but they also put their linebackers into kind of specific drops that would get them in the way of where Rodgers wanted to go with the ball initially. And that kind of, it basically froze him the entire time, and there was nowhere to go for a while. And everything he wanted to do was going to be a broken play. So that was so dominant but it's so difficult to picture them doing that twice to Aaron Rodgers, because I mean, we saw even in the game against the Giants, the first half, they threw stuff at him that he hadn't seen. It was having a real impact. By the end of the game, it was back business as usual. You know, he was the same guy that has been tearing the league to pieces. You can't limit him for that long. So it seems really unlikely to me that Dallas are going to be able to rock up with the same game plan that was so successful and for it to still make a difference the way it did.
Yeah, it's hard to pick against the hottest quarterback in the league, and I'm doing that as well. I'm going with Dallas. I just think Dallas is going to have too much success running the ball, and frankly, I think the loss of Jordy Nelson is going to be pretty huge, whether it's Devontae Adams dropping a ball or Geronimo Allison, not running the right route or whatever it might be. I think this is a Dallas Cowboy team that is built pretty well and is healthy at the right time. I think Sean Lee is just one of the more underrated players in the league. I like what he does, and he's just kind of that quarterback on defense. And as long as he's healthy, I think the Dallas defense can hold up. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is going to get his. I think they're going to obviously have some success, but I think Dallas will emerge victorious in this particular game. Mike, we have renamed Mike's Crappy Bets because you went 3-1 last week. It is now Mike's Mediocre Bets. Who do we like this weekend?
So, obviously going to bet all 4 games again just because it's the playoffs. Got to do it. So the obvious picks, the ones I win against, are I already said New England, and then I picked the favorites there on out. So I'll go with Seattle to cover -5 against Atlanta. I just don't think that it's going to be a blowout in that one. I think it's still going to be a close game, even if I like Atlanta. Kansas City, I also like to cover because it's small line, 1.5 to 2 in some places. So obviously pick them. I still think they'll cover that. And then I'll pick Dallas to cover a 4.5 line against Green Bay. I just think if they win, it's going to be somewhat of a runaway. I don't think it's going to come down to a close game if Dallas has it. And if it is a close game, I think they'll be able to run out at the end anyway. So I'll go with those 4.
I don't know how to feel about this because the three of us, first of all, besides the Seattle-Atlanta game, we picked the same teams. And I kind of like your bets, too. I don't know if I like the Dallas-Green Bay game as much, but I think I do. And I definitely like New England, and I like Seattle getting the points. So I don't know, man. I'm not feeling too good about this. Sam, what are your plans for the weekend? Where do you watch the game, by the way?
Playoff games.
I know. Where do you watch the game? I mean, do you go to some sort of American bar and watch the game?
No, I fire up the big screen.
How big is your big screen?
55 inches.
55 inches of love, huh?
That is not big, sorry. But
hey, it's big for Ireland.
It was big when it was new. I'm going to have to invest. If they ever let me into the country, I'll invest in a monster.
There you go.
Mike, what are your playoff plans?
I'm going to be working all of them probably, it seems. So that's exciting. Yeah, I know.
I like it. I'll be watching the games. I'm actually going. I'm going to be going skiing and snowboarding. So should be a fun weekend. Nonetheless, that is it for us, guys. As always, if you like the show, do us a favor. Head over to iTunes, write us a review. If you include your Twitter handle and you give us a nice little review, you will be entered into a promotion. And you might just win a free PFF subscription. I say this, and by the way, I don't even know if the promotion is still going on. So if PFF won't honor it, I will, damn it. Sam, if you want to tweet us, you can. If you want to send your hate tweets, it's at @PFF_Sam, @PFF_Mike, and I, of course, am at Tuck on Sports. Any lasting thoughts, Sam?
None whatsoever. I think we got it covered.